So they did it. After 10 long years, the Boston Celtics finally found themselves at the top of the mountain as Boston returned back to the NBA Finals, winning their first championship since 2008, and they did so in dominating fashion, as they only lost 3 games in the totality of the postseason run. And yet, the dialogue that surrounds the Boston Celtics certainly does not reflect how good they are.
The Eastern Conference and the injuries did the Celtics a disservice.
Which conference was the better conference?
Western.
Easy to Western.
So the Boston Celtics were far and away the best team in the Eastern Conference. That explains the record.
That's why I really like Dallas in this year. I think that their path to get to the NBA Finals has prepared them and shows everybody that they are capable of beating anybody.
All throughout the playoffs and even heading into this regular season, there was this growing level of skepticism that was clouding the true identity of who Boston really was. And this doubt was based on the idea that last year's Celtics team was never really challenged and that they had the easiest path to a championship in league history. Which is such a bold claim that I had to put it to the test, especially when heading into the NBA Finals, you had experts willing to pick the Dallas Mavericks over the Boston Celtics, which to me made no sense at all. But hey, who am I to tell people how they should make their picks? And if you are going to do so, make sure you do it with today's sponsors, DraftKings Pick6. The NBA season is finally back, and I know for a fact there's a bunch of people out there watching who love themselves some daily fantasy. Well, DraftKings has you covered with a brand new way to play daily fantasy sports with DraftKings Pick6. All new customers who play $5 will receive $50 in Pick6 credit, and the setup is really simple. All you have to do is just download the DraftKings Pick6 app now, put in your information to make an account, and use my promo code LOW. After you create an account and use my code, then you're free to pick at least 2 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a certain stat. For example, Jokic just started off the season extremely hot, so you can choose if he's going to continue to put up 30-plus points or not, or the amount of assists that Harden is racking out with the Clippers. Now you may be wondering, well, what makes Pick6 different? Well, after you make your choices, you lock them in and get the opportunity to compete against other people, your own peers, for a shot at a huge cash prize. So if any of this sounds interesting, go download the DraftKings Pick6 app now and use my code LOW only at DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours. Now, I want to be completely clear here. When people are making this criticism, it is not specifically framed to the Boston Celtics, rather than part of a much bigger picture, and that is the Eastern Conference just sucks. Now, hopefully I don't have to go into too much detail about this, especially because how bad the Eastern Conference has been to start off this season. However, just in case you are unaware, this is a problem that has been persistent for a really long time. On your screen is a graph that is outlining the win percentage between both conferences since 1970. The red line represents the Western Conference, while the blue line represents the Eastern Conference, and the dotted line in the middle is the 500 mark. And as you can clearly see, since the year 2000, the Eastern Conference has lived below the 500 mark for practically every single season. And to put specific numbers behind these years, here are the 15 worst conferences by win percentage since 1970, and majority of them all reside in the Eastern Conference within the last 25 years. And yes, one of these years was last year's Eastern Conference at a win percentage of 47.2%. And just in case you want to argue that this only occurs because of the Eastern Conference in totality rather than the playoff teams that really matter in this conversation, well, that's not 100% true either, because looking at the playoff picture in both conferences, you can see that there is a clear difference. In the Western Conference, the bar to make a postseason appearance is 47 wins, which out east would be enough to be the 5th seed. And if we were to rank all 16 teams based off of their record, 7 of the top 10 teams all reside in the West, while only 3 of them reside in the Eastern Conference. And even if we wanted to get even more detailed with all of this, we all know that individual players play a massive role on how dominant and good a team can be. And looking at the 15 players that made an All-NBA team last year, the Eastern Conference only had 4 representatives. Now, specifically, how does this pertain to the Boston Celtics and their path throughout the postseason last year? Well, last year, Boston, en route to the finals, matched up against the Miami Heat, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Indiana Pacers, who had a record of 46-36, 48-34, and 47-35. Which is crazy because this means that the Celtics were not only able to skate through the East without ever having to face a 50-win team until the finals, but more importantly, on average, they only had to face a 47-win team in the first 3 rounds. So with an average opponent win total of only 47, where does that rank amongst other easy paths to the finals throughout NBA history? Well, dating back since 1984, it's not the worst, nor second or third, fourth, or fifth. It's actually ranked all the way down at 19th, which is far removed from the easiest path in NBA history that many people have tried to make it out to be. So based off of this information, one would believe that all of this has been just a huge misunderstanding, a complete myth that we just busted, and everyone is just exaggerating on how easy the path was for the Celtics. But as we all know, there's a lot of context that's missing, in particular the players that were unavailable for the Celtics opponents at every single round of the playoffs. Jimmy Butler missed all of round 1, Jared Allen missed all of round 2 alongside Donovan Mitchell, who was unavailable for 2 games, and Halliburton as well missed 2 games in the conference finals. So, using the record that these teams finished the regular season with isn't a proper representation on who these teams were when the Boston Celtics faced them in the postseason. Which then begs the question on how do we get the more accurate representation since these players, who are very valuable, missed time throughout the series. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent with you. In my opinion, this number does not exist. We all know that players may perform and have a certain level of impact in the regular season that can be drastically different than it is in the postseason. I think Jimmy Butler is the perfect example of that. However, in the pursuit of trying to find a conclusion to this conundrum, I'd settled on the idea of just taking away the win share that each player provided to their team's record by the end of the regular season. Now again, this isn't perfect, there are certainly flaws with it, but I do believe it's the best way to come to an accurate representation of the type of team that the Celtics face on a round-to-round basis. So in round 1, Miami, who won 46 games in a regular season, was without Jimmy Butler throughout the totality of the series. Butler last year had a win share of 9.1, which means that a 46-win Miami Heat team is much closer to a 37-win ball club. And then you have the Cleveland Cavaliers, where things get a little bit tricky. The Cavs last year finished with 48 wins. However, Jared Allen was not available for the totality of the series. But then you have Donovan Mitchell, who participated in 3 of the 5 games in the series. So it would be unfair if I took away all 6.4 of his win shares from the total wins from the Cavs. So instead, what I'm going to do is divide the amount of win shares to the amount of games that were played in a series, and then multiply that number by the amount of games that D-Mitch missed. So instead of 6.4, we now have 2.5, which now makes a 48-win Cleveland team to roughly 35 wins. And finally, we have a 47-win Pacers team in the conference finals, where Halliburton missed half of the series. He had a 9-win share by the end of the season. However, once more, it would be unfair if I took away all 9 of those win shares from the record from the Pacers, since he did participate in half of the series. So instead of 9, I'm only taking away 4.5, which means instead of Boston facing a 47-win Pacers team, it was much closer to only 42 to 43 wins. Which then brings the average win total of the Celtics opponents leading into the finals only up to 38. And with that more defined number that again may not be 100% accurate, but certainly is a better representation than the 47 that we had before, it moves the Celtics from the 19th easiest path all the way to the number 1 spot. Now, before you leave an angry comment about how all of this is unfair because I'm not making adjustments and accounting for injuries when it comes to other teams and their paths to the finals, don't you dare worry, because I did. And shout out to The Ringer because they did as well, and we still came to the same conclusion that even when you take into consideration injuries with all of these teams across NBA history, last year's Boston Celtics team still had the easiest path to a championship. So it's pretty definitive, and the criticism that people have levied towards last year's Boston Celtics team is valid. But for me, that's not a conclusion that I do not believe gives a proper and accurate depiction of what exactly occurred last year. And the reason for this is because going back to the list of teams with the easiest path to the finals, what I learned before these last 2 postseason runs is that the team with the easiest, second easiest, third easiest, and even the 4th easiest path to the finals were the Showtime Lakers, which I found very interesting, but looking back at my research, it all makes sense. Going back to the 15 weakest conferences since 1970, 2 of those conferences were the 80s West, and going back to the line graph where I showed the East and West teetering between the 500 line, you can clearly see in the 80s, the Western Conference, very similar to the East over the last 25 years, lived below the 500 mark. So why is it that no one ever speaks about it, even though the criticism would be valid? Well, for starters, many people may not have been aware of this, and actually the dialogue around the Showtime Lakers may change after this video. Who knows? But I do believe a much bigger component to why people don't discuss this is just because of the perception of the Lakers. Multiple Hall of Famers, an all-time great head coach in Pat Riley, and one of the best duos in NBA history with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who had MVP caliber seasons that overlapped with one another. With these pieces being major components on how the Showtime Lakers were built together, it is easy to just come to a conclusion that the Lakers in the 80s was one of, if not the best team in the NBA on a year-to-year basis, and you would be correct. And that reality would become even more cemented when they started to beat the other really good teams out east in the NBA Finals. So sure, in 1985, the Lakers got to beat the brakes out of the Phoenix Suns in the first round, but they also went to the finals and beat the Boston Celtics as well. So the criticism of a weak path to the finals, though it may be true, is practically irrelevant if they're still able to compete and beat some of the better teams in the NBA on a year-to-year basis back in the 80s. Now fast forward to where we are today, and in my opinion, that is the biggest problem that the Boston Celtics face. It's not that Boston had an easy path to the finals, rather than people utilizing that as a reasoning to why they want to confirm whatever biases they may have towards the team. And to be fair to these people, I thoroughly understand the skepticism. It's been a long time coming and a lot of disappointing years along the way, especially during the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum era. However, it would be very naive to believe that the Celtics team that we have today is the same one that we have seen in years prior. Players such as Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard really does round out this roster and make their depth much more defined. The addition of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis really increases the ceiling of what this team can look like when everyone is healthy and available. And personally, I'm just tired of people overlooking the development and leaps that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have made over the years, especially when it comes to Tatum and his passing and playmaking. The Celtics were a historically great offense last year with the avalanche of threes that they can make at practically every position. The defense was relentless and versatile, so trying to create any type of advantage against that unit was very hard to do. And one of the more underrated aspects, especially when it comes to Tatum and Brown, is the availability. Tatum and Brown do not get enough credit for how healthy and available they have been over the past 5 to 7 years. And everything I just said about the Celtics last year is applicable to what they're doing to start this season off now. So instead of trying to find excuses to write off what the Celtics did last year as this one-off, what more than likely is occurring is a sustained level of excellence that more than likely is the preliminary stages of a dynastic run. And just for the people out there who believe that I'm being hyperbolic, well, on your screen is every team that's won a championship since 1985, and I plotted them according to the amount of wins that they had versus their net rating. There's Hakeem's Rockets, Bird's Celtics, Shaq and Kobe Lakers, the Big Three out in Miami, Curry's Warriors, and all the way at the top are the 96 Chicago Bulls, who won 72 wins with a net rating of 13.4. And not too far behind them are last year's Boston Celtics team. So yeah, the Celtics were that dominant, undeniably one of the best championship teams that we have seen in the modern NBA. And again, they are already duplicating that level of dominance to start this year. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be updated when I upload on this channel. And until next time, I see you all later. Peace.